Everybody and welcome. My name is Valenza Shin. I'm class of 84 and Senior Associate Director for Advising and Programs at Beyond Barnard. And it's truly a pleasure to welcome you to this session and to Reunion Reimagined. And a couple of housekeeping items first, and then we'll get started. First is a recording notice. If you've been on any of the other sessions, you've already heard this. This online event enables an attendee to participate through a personal device's microphone and/or camera. An attendee may elect not to participate through use of a microphone and/or camera. The election of an attendee to use a microphone and/or camera constitutes a release and waiver of rights in the capture of the attendee's image, likeness, and/or voice for the exclusive use by Barnard College. So we are recording the session, so just wanted you to know that and to know your options. Also, before we get started, I would be remiss not to mention the racial and political unrest taking place in the US and around the world as we speak here today. Systemic racism and violence against people of color, particularly Black Americans, is not a new phenomenon, but especially in the context of our global pandemic, these inequities are magnified and brought to the forefront for everyone to face. The Barnard community is dedicated to tackling these issues, and we are here to lift each other up in difficult times. And speaking of difficult times, that brings us to our topic for today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get things started. So as already noted, I'm Valenza Shin, and our topic today is Career Path Check-In, Pivoting During a Crisis. This is my, I believe, 11th straight year of doing a career-related workshop at Reunion, and the first time that I've done it virtually, at least at Reunion. I've done other virtual workshops and webinars before, but definitely a first here. There's definitely advantages to this. There's so many of you signed up and able to participate, which is wonderful, but it's been a challenging couple of weeks. I so missed being on campus for graduation, you know, for an in-person graduation and just the normal rhythm of the academic year. And then Reunion always quickly follows that. I think campus is never more gorgeous than it is during Reunion, and New York City is so beautiful in late May, early June. So I know you all are missing the opportunity to gather in person, but I'm glad we're able to be here today via Zoom to talk about what's going on in your careers and some ways of thinking about using this time to pivot or think about pivoting. Hold on, I'm having trouble getting it to, come on. Ah, okay. Sorry, my mouse is a little sensitive and kind of jumps ahead. Let me see if I can get it. Okay, sorry about that. You're getting a nice little preview here. Hold on one sec. Sorry about this. I just need to get back to the beginning. There we go. Okay. So briefly today, we're going to do some introductions. First, I'm going to do a brief introduction to Beyond Barnard, which is new since some of you graduated. And then I'm going to outline a sort of career transition, career pivot process and talk throughout about how that can be impacted by what's happening today with coronavirus and the impact on the economy, and then get a chance to talk about and think about your next steps and circle back to Beyond Barnard and the resources we can offer you during this time and beyond. So Beyond Barnard's, I guess, slogan is your path, your purpose, and here's some visual images of the many different ways and places our students and alumni head out. And our mission statement is this. And as with all mission statements, it took us a while to put this together, but we are happy with it, and in our couple of years of existence have tried to follow it. just a little bit about Beyond Barnard to put it in context for those of you who may not be familiar or have just a little bit of familiarity. It was launched in 2018 and brings together under one roof these 4 teams of people and various things. So as I mentioned at the top, I lead the advising and programs team. And so myself and my team of 5 do the bulk of the one-on-one career advising. We also advise for graduate school and competitive fellowships. Our experiential education folks bring together campus jobs, community jobs, and our funded internship program. Employer relations, you may or may not remember from your days here, but this is our team that works with organizations and companies who post jobs and internships and come and recruit on campus in all sorts of forms. And finally, we have a data and operations team that does a whole bunch of things, but the data has been particularly interesting to me, and I'll share one of my favorite graphics in a moment. We're a team of 16, and you knew us probably mostly as either Barnard Career Development or Barnard Career Services when you were here, and that's all still here. But what has been brought under the roof that's had a really great impact is the graduate school advising, the fellowship advising, which used to be under the Dean of Studies, and the student employment. And basically the idea is to bring together under one roof everything that has to do with jobs, careers, and future study in one place. We're a team of 16. We went remote with most of the rest of Barnard on March 13th and pivoted, as most people have had to a virtual existence. We're particularly proud of the fact that our advising and programs really didn't really miss a step. We didn't have to cancel very much at all. We did a bunch of virtual programming for students over the course of the spring, and we're just about to launch a suite of summer virtual programs for both students and alumni, which I'll tell you a little bit more about at the end. And in terms of tracking data, we actually logged more advising appointments this year than we did last year, even with a slight slowdown once everything went remote. So we're here, we're working hard and we've had to pivot ourselves, and we're doing our best to bring that experience to our students and alumni who we know are also out there facing a lot of challenges and pivoting. Oops. So I said I would share one of my favorite graphics from our data team. This is one of our surveys we do every year, is the First Destination Survey. This is from the class of 2019. And one of the things we are trying to disrupt, I'd say, since launching Beyond Barnard, is this idea that there's a traditional Barnard path. And for that matter, that there's an untraditional Barnard path. There really is neither a traditional nor untraditional. And I think this data shows you the destinations that there is no single destination that dominates. Our highest are at 11% in education on the one hand and tech on the other hand. So obviously class of 2020 is going to look a little bit different, but we're tracking that as well, and we'll be sharing that in the future. Beyond Barnard and alumni, I just wanted to sort of share our philosophy there. The idea with alumni is that you can both get support from Beyond Barnard. Barnard has always offered lifelong career support to its graduates and will continue to do so. And you also can give back. So there's a variety of ways in which you can participate, including mentoring, career insight panels, hosting field trips, and then I'll refer you to Handshake a couple of times during the presentation and give you the info at the end. But Handshake is our platform both for making appointments and responding to events, but also for looking for jobs, posting jobs and internships. So alumni are absolutely integral to what we do. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with there we go. Okay, and it's jumped ahead again. Okay, so now what we want to do is give you a chance to introduce yourselves. So in just a moment, we're going to send you into breakout groups for about 6 minutes. And I'm going to give you a script. This is a script. It's adapted from one that we've been using with students, and they both love this and hate this because, of course, especially when they're in the room with us, we actually make them go around and introduce themselves by script. The reason we do the script is to help people be focused and to move things along a little bit more quickly. So your version of the script is here. And before we actually go into the breakout groups, I'm going to give you all a minute to think about how you're going to answer this, especially that last part. And I just want to qualify, we don't, I know that everybody here isn't necessarily contemplating a major career change or job change, but if you are, or if you're even just thinking, sort of longer term about something that might come about, that's what we'd love to tap into. So tell us, tell your group what you're currently or most recently have been doing, but then think about a change. Could be to a different field, or it could simply be what change you're contemplating within your current work. So take a second to think about that. I'll stop talking, and then alumni, my alumni relations co-host will put you into groups in about 1 minute. Okay, so you'll have about 6 minutes total to first introduce yourselves, and then everybody should have a chance to speak a second time. And then Zoom will bring you back here in exactly 6 minutes. So thanks. And Lacey, you can go ahead and divvy everyone up.
Hi, how can I help?
Hi.
What are we supposed to be doing? There's just two of us here.
Just introducing yourselves, and just talking about kind of your career paths and what your goals are.
Okay, is it supposed to be this smaller groups?
Yeah, they're pretty small. Some there are some people that haven't joined through the since they've called in, so they're meant to be pretty small.
Okay. Lucia, are you there?
Yes. So I'll go first. My name is Lucia. I am a graduate of the class of 2000, and my major was English literature.
Great. I think hopefully everyone made it back safely and had a good conversation in their breakout groups. So just a few thoughts before we get started on sort of laying out a career pivot, career transition process. Whenever we work with students, mostly alumni on this topic, we talk about making a mindful transition, that this is a active process, not passive. It's both internal and external, and that you need to practice confidence. And that actually was part of the idea behind making you follow a script, because there's something about actually having to say out loud those words, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm planning to do this, that can really just sort of help in that process of getting you ready for making some sort of move. And this practice confidence point in particular, you know, it's sort of, I talk with alumni a lot when I meet them one-on-one about changing the script in your head. Whenever you're job searching, and I think this is particularly heightened in a recession, in a tough job market, it's so easy to feel, who can I get to hire me? Who can I get to fund me if you're thinking about a business? How do I convince people? And that's definitely always going to be part of it, but it's trying to change that script in your head and saying instead, who gets me, right? Who gets what I have, my skills, my experience, my interests, right? So, and then the part that I put in quotes there, the ask out loud, just saying out loud what you need, what you think you need, is really important. It's this sort of speaking out loud. And sometimes that's, just with friends or close associates, sometimes it's with an advisor, but that practicing saying things out loud is really, really important. And then of course, the question that we'll be sort of dealing with all day here is, does this still apply in a recession? And I'm gonna argue yes. We absolutely know that things are tough out there. We basically went, if we just think of it in terms of our seniors, the class of 2020, we went, I would argue, within maybe about 72 hours from one of the best hiring markets we've seen in years to absolute, disaster. So it's been swift and quick. And for myself, I'm the only person on my team who was career revising back in 2008, 2009. So it's been a very swift return for me back to those days of, working particularly with alumni, but also with graduating students, and remembering some of those lessons. But, for the most part, what we do at Barnard is we double down on our best practices, what we've developed working with all of you on what are going to be the best ways to find a job, explore your options. Yes, I mean, the number one thing is whenever there's a recession and a really hard job market, it's going to be a longer process, longer job searches, maybe a longer launch time for a side gig or a business or a solo practice that you are thinking about launching on. But our argument is that clarity on your part, taking this time, whether it's just today or today is a starting point for you, clarity on your part is going to increase your chances of a successful search. So instead of, sort of quickly moving to what's familiar, putting off some of the changes you might have been thinking about, it's taking even just a little bit of time to sit with your options, think about what's important to you. Flexibility, that's probably the word we've used the most with our seniors who aren't employed yet. And we've talked a lot about there's short-term decisions and there's long-term decisions. You can absolutely keep your long-term plans in mind. They may not work out right at this moment. So what are you going to do in the short term? What are your choices? And depending on your specific employment situation, your specific financial situation, you may need to make some short-term choices that you ideally wouldn't have to make to stick with a job you're not loving or to take on a side job to bring in some income, to be looking while you're laid off, but hoping to go back soon. There's going to be some choices you need to make in the short term. Our argument, our hope, and we're here for helping you keep that longer term plan in sight. And then I just repeated the bullets from the last one because I think it bears repeating, that you need to practice confidence even when you don't 100% feel confident. But I think underneath the surface of any Barnard woman, there's insecurities, but there's also confidence. And, we want to bring the confidence to the forefront at least some of the time. So, great. And then another. So now, we're going to spend a little time with me sort of doing two things, outlining an approach to career transition. And again, as I said from the outset, this could simply mean a promotion. It could mean a side move within your current field. It could mean a different field. It could mean leaving the world of full-time employment and striking out on your own. So there's lots of different possibilities, and we're going to try and talk about it in a general enough way that it could be helpful for everyone who's thinking about it. So the 4-step process that we're going to talk about today and give you a little bit of an opportunity to practice some of this is to first focus on yourself. Then look outward at the workforce and careers, especially what's going on now in the short term and what might happen in the long term, and then make some decisions and then take action. we're not going to do all of that in one session here, but we're hopefully going to get you in a position to get started on that. So part of this looking inward is taking stock of where you are right now. And again, whether you're currently working and you know, sort of barely keeping up with things, or maybe slightly underemployed at the moment, or unemployed for whatever reason. This is a moment to think about sort of your own work and ask yourself these questions, or have somebody ask these questions of you. And then take it outward a little bit, you know, whether colleagues, former colleagues, managers, your professional network in general, you know, to think about what's going on there and do a little bit of an initial assessment of, are we just talking about a small change, a small shift, or are we thinking of doing something really profoundly different? Which can take longer and sort of, you know, have a little bit longer lead time. So either way, once you've decided you want to make some sort of change, now, soon, later, whatever that change is, the self-assessment part of this, the looking inward part, is what. And there's some open-ended ways of doing this. Exploratory questions that you can do in writing. I had an alumna who was about 5 years out once take all of these exploratory questions and then send them to me ahead of the appointment, and she'd written basically an essay for each one, which was awesome, and sort of helped further the conversation. It can be shared or not shared. These are also questions you could talk with, you know, anybody within your circle, but you also could meet with a career advisor, whether it's through Beyond Barnard or through, you know, there's many career advisors, both Barnard alumni who work in the career space, as well as, of course, lots of other people who are in this space. So that's sort of the exploratory questions is sort of a more open-ended way, and that's often where we'll start. If you make an initial appointment with Beyond Barnard and select career exploration or career change or even job search, we'll start with some open-ended questions to get a sense of where you are, what you're thinking. And then depending on how seriously you're exploring making a change, sometimes we'll recommend taking career assessments. We look at 4 areas in career assessments: your interests, what sort of motivates you and drives you; personality, right? What would be a good fit for you, skills, and values. So we've got sort of open-ended and then a little bit more focused. So yeah, so these are some exploratory questions. I'm going to share a few of them. You could think about them, you could jot down some ideas, or you could save them for later. We'll share this, not only is the session being recorded, but we should be able to send you the slides afterwards as well, so that you can see these. And again, these are often questions we would ask in a session, but you can ask yourself. This is one of my favorite questions. I find it just really interesting what people first remember wanting to be. I'll think about those for a minute, maybe jot down a few ideas. I'll turn to the next page in just a moment. We put these together as a group a few years back, and we meet every 6 months or so to revise them. You know, what kind of questions have you been asking both students and alumni to sort of prod some of this thinking. When I first started career advising, it was 2008, 2009, and every student wanted to be, well, not every, but a lot of students wanted to be forensic scientists, because that was the days of CSI, you know, 4 different versions of CSI. So I always thought this was an interesting question to ask. This one can be a challenge, but really interesting to try and boil it down to a single descriptor. And then this gets to an interesting point. I probably ask this of almost everybody who comes into my office who's, you know, questioning what to do, thinking about a change, trying to get at some of those hidden things that you might not have said out loud before, and that you've got some reservations. And what I find is people will literally put the reservations in the same sentence. All right, I think the next slide gets to that, the negative thoughts. And people will literally do this. They'll say, well, I always wanted to be a writer, but I can't do that, you know? And of course, my role as the advisor is to be the one who asks back, why not? I mean, maybe you can't, but why not? Let's open up the possibilities. Let's explore. And, you know, trying to postpone some of these negative thoughts and practical considerations. We're going to get to those soon, but you want to give, in this first part of career transitioning, career pivoting, you want to give yourself the space and the time to just throw open the doors and think about everything. Think about all the possibilities without being practical, without worrying about everything. Again, super tough to do this during the time we're living through, but to the extent that we've all been able to compartmentalize a little bit, this is about being able to sort of say, all right, I'm taking this half hour or half an hour a week to shut out all of the stuff going on around me and to really think inward, really think about what's important to me and what had I been thinking before all of this? How has the current crisis influenced my thinking? Really take that time. And again, some people find this easier to do themselves. Some people find it easier to do in a group setting or in a one-on-one advising session. So you know, be thinking about what might be helpful for that with all of you. In terms of the career assessments, the first two, the strong interest inventory and the Myers-Briggs type indicator, are the two formal assessments that we use through Beyond Barnard. You can we always have an initial appointment first and talk through, you know, why you're interested in taking these and how they might be helpful. And then we do charge a small fee. It's $15 each. And then once that's processed, we send you the links to take it online, and then we download the results and have a file where we go through. I think somebody needs to mute. I'm hearing some sort of coughing and sneezing in the background. So double check that you're muted. So these are two formal assessments we do through our office. I'll put one caveat. We have, not surprisingly, a budget freeze until the fiscal year ends on June 30th. So we're not allowed to purchase any more of these. So if you are interested in doing career assessments, just know you can make the initial appointment, but you won't be able to actually do the assessments until after July 1, when we have our new budget and are allowed to spend sparingly again. And then there's two more informal. In other words, they don't have to be processed by us. Hello, here, my computer is being annoying again. And then the other two sort of quadrants are looking at skills and values. And these we don't have an official formal evaluation for, but we can give you recommendations. There's a lot of different versions of these out over the internet, and these you pay for yourself if there is a charge. Some are free, some have a under $10 fee, and then you get the results directly. They don't have to be processed by us, but then you can choose them. So we're going to delve into the skills and values just briefly. The idea when you're looking at your skills assessment is looking at the concept of motivated skills, which is not just what you're good at, but what you enjoy doing. And one thing that very typically happens, and the research shows more for women than men, is that you're good at something, and so people keep giving it you to do. And very often we cooperate with that and say, sure, I'll keep doing that. And so then you can end up, you know, within a fairly short time, or maybe over a period of years, ending up doing things because you're good at them, but you don't particularly enjoy doing them. So we try and sort of separate those two things out and look for that sweet spot of things that you are good at, that you do know about, but also that you enjoy and get satisfaction from. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum would be burnout skills. It's things that you aren't good at, or that just come harder for you. You know, they take more effort, they don't come naturally, and that you don't particularly enjoy doing. Every job, I think, has some of this. And one thing we, you know, talk to our more, you know, recent graduates about is, you know, a lot of entry-level jobs have a lot of this, you know, things you might not be particularly good at or might not particularly enjoy doing. And so we have an exercise which is coming, which I'll get to now. As soon as my computer lets me turn the page. Come on. There we go. Which is, so again, I'll give you just a minute to get to take a stab at this, and you obviously can circle back afterwards and take more time on this. But you know, take an activity at work and think about, what do you what percentage of your time do you currently spend on it? And then if you could wave a magic wand and either change your job or get a new job, how much time would you like to spend on this activity or task? So again, take a second to think that through or jot down a couple of ideas. And one thing I end up, after doing this exercise with people, is end up talking about, one way of thinking about your career and your career trajectory is how can you, each time you make a move, either internally or by, switching companies or switching professions or fields, how can you increase the amount of time you're spending on the things you enjoy and decrease the amount of time you're spending on the things you don't enjoy? And that's it's just, again, you don't always have total control over that, but it's worth giving some thought to as you make your move in your plans. Values assessments are about helping to clarify what is most and least important to you, and that can be both work related and lifestyle related. I'm going to pick up the pace a little and make sure we have time to get to everything. And so how these work is very often you'll get a long list of values, like say 20 to 30 values, and then you're asked to sort them into categories. So I just did a couple of real quick versions. I'm going to give you 3 choices. So again, just really quickly I'm going to give you a very brief amount of time to just sort of look at the 3 and say, all right, what would be my number 1? All right, another option, another question. Okay, in this set, what's your number 1? Okay, and last set, in this category, what's your number 1? Now, these are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but if you had to choose, that's sort of the idea behind doing this, is to sort of tease out those values. So these exercises can be really helpful in terms of, again, sort of sorting through and kind of articulating and really thinking about, what's important to you. And this tends to change over time, with, the theory, at least behind personality, is that it doesn't really change that much over time, but something like values will change over time. So again, another thing to check in on and sort of think about. So that's sort of looking at the know yourself part. And now we want to, once you've had that chance to do some self-examination, and again, the timetable, this can be done very quickly. You could spend an afternoon on this and then be ready to go, or you could spend longer on it. It all sort of depends on your situation and where you're at. But the next step is to look outward. What's out there for me? What careers, what roles, what skill sets, what's going on? So we'll take a little bit of work there. And basically here, I'm just going to give you some resources. Some of you may be familiar with ONET Online. It's run by the U.S. Department of Labor. And there's all sorts of things on it. I always recommend people just set aside a little time and just kind of poke around in there. It can get a little overwhelming, but one of the things that can sometimes help focus is you can put in any job title and it will either suggest related titles or go straight to a page with all sorts of information. But then once you do get to one of these comprehensive profiles, there's always a related occupation list. And, honestly, sometimes it just sends you in a circle, but sometimes it sends you down some interesting paths to things you may not have heard of, may not have thought about. And then you can look at those. And the idea here is to just sort of, have part of you kind of watching yourself. What sounds interesting? What makes your eyes glaze over? What's catching your interest, and take some notes. And then there is another federal level resource that delves a little bit deeper into stats and perspectives. And that, I'm sure at the moment is they're probably a little behind given the swift change in our economic circumstances, but something to keep an eye on and to look at some of the trends coming into this immediate crisis and what are some of the predicted trends coming out. And then there are state versions of most of these. I just mentioned the New York one, but I did a quick search last night, and almost every state has something. A lot of them have this career zone language. I know there's a pa.careerzone.org, and different ones for California and Missouri and various. So even if you just Google your state and then career information, you'll find, and those can be really helpful too. They tend to be sort of a combination of ONET and the Occupational Outlook Handbook. They'll give you lots of stats, but also give you some sort of general information about careers and the jobs and the preparation needed. And then from there, what I often recommend people do is to take this information, take these job titles and some of these possibilities and bring them to other places. One is to go to LinkedIn just for job research. And you take some of those same titles that sounded interesting to you and you use them as a search term and look at who comes up. Look at their path. And then also as people's companies come up, take a look at companies and organizations that come through. So it's using LinkedIn, not so much as a networking tool, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, but as a research tool. And then finally, if you can handle this, because sometimes going to job sites, you can get a little overwhelmed, but it's looking at job sites as a research tool as opposed to, starting to apply, which you might be in the middle of, or you may not be ready for. But the same thing, use these same titles and see how employers are describing them, and see what the job descriptions are saying, and do they interest you? Do they sound boring? What parts of it sound good? There's general sites such as Handshake, which is our job site. It definitely aims toward current graduating students, but also there are what are called experienced or alumni, more experienced level things. And then there's a bunch of niche sites by field. You're probably familiar with some of yours. And actually, we had a student this spring working on a project compiling a bunch of niche sites, which we're going to make public in a week or two on our resources page. So there's a lot of very specific sites. And the idea here is, again, to be sort of researching and taking a look at how this work is being described and how, how it might fit in with your next move. Okay, it keeps jumping way ahead. Then we've got salary research. I put the online salary finders down at the bottom because they can sometimes be helpful in a ballpark kind of way, but it's so hard because there's so many variations on salary according to geography and industry and things like that. So wanted to, suggest that your own professional network, if you're willing to ask the question, can sometimes yield a lot of information about salaries. And a lot of professional organizations that you might belong to do annual salary surveys, and that can be very helpful. I mentioned professionals for nonprofits specifically because they do a salary report each year. I think it comes out in February or March. And at the moment, I think it's New York, DC, and Philly. It's sort of a Northeastern-based thing, but they seem to be expanding gradually. So there might be one that's good for your geographical region as well. Recruiters and headhunters, should you know any or should you have a conversation, they do tend to have a more global sense of salaries. And then one of my favorite workplace blogs is Ask a Manager. It's a workplace advice column, has lots of great advice for navigating work in general and then job searching. And she does, I believe, an annual salary survey as well. So if you click on the topic of salary, you can find out some sort of crowdsourced information there as well. And the idea here through this process of looking at the workforce is trying to make things real, trying to really see what's out there. Okay. Okay, and then finally, you're going to need to talk to people. All right, especially if you're considering a major change into a fairly different field. And that's where informational interviewing comes in. You want to talk with more than one person in the field you're considering. Again, just some suggested questions for some open-ended questions to get things started, get a sense of where they're coming from, and then focus it at the end more towards, here's where you can ask some specific advice. You know, what are the in-demand skills? How are people acquiring those? What's looked on, you know, favorably? What's looked on more skeptically? What positions and titles should you be looking at? And then if you feel comfortable, I think it's at least worth asking the question about salary ranges. Sometimes people don't know or don't want to talk about it in a general way, but often people can furnish some really valuable information. And I think in general, we should talk more about money, talk more about salaries. So we're big advocates of talking about money. Okay, and then we want to, third step, decide on goals and focus. So you've spent this time looking at yourself, you've spent some time researching the workforce, now you need to decide on goals. And this is, again, I think I used the phrase already, making it real. It's taking a look, it's trying to get this down to one or two possible, possibilities of the things you're considering, and then looking at some of this practical, how's this actually going to work? And of course, taking the current situation into effect it's going to lengthen that timeline, and there's so much uncertainty. Not that economists ever agree, but they seem to be in particular disagreement over whether this is going to be something that's quick, if this is going to be something that's prolonged. And it's also uneven. It's hitting some industries much harder than others, even though I think it's causing all industries to be sort of nervous and cautious. So it's hard to do this. The making it real part is going to be tricky at this particular moment, but we're all kind of operating in the land of making our best guess, and seeing what we can find out. Definitely a lot of people are taking this time in the midst of the pandemic and our slow steps, sort of coming back out and into the world to think about gaining some skills and experience. There's certainly tons of volunteer work to go around. Project work, especially paid project work, could be a little harder to come by, but something to look for and talk to your network about, especially. It's a good opportunity to write and post. You don't have to create your own blog necessarily. You could post something on LinkedIn or another outlet. Get yourself thinking, putting together your thoughts about the new field or the new role or some new area you're interested in, and then training options from classes to programs to graduate school. Come on. And then finally, we're going to take action. And this is where sometimes people who come in about, making a change or doing a career exploration, they want to jump straight to this. They want help with their resume or with their LinkedIn profile. But you need to have, put a little thought. Again, it can be quick, but you have to put a little thought before we start sort of rebranding. But this is the strategic part of it. This is where myself and my team can be really helpful if you're feeling stuck, talking about, how do you tailor that resume? How can we use resume best practices, cover letter best practices? How can you sharpen up that LinkedIn profile? I put a question mark next to in-person networking, because who knows when we'll be able to do it in person, but definitely, connect any way you can. And, if you're ready to launch a job search, right, you want to look at both the open market, the posted jobs, and then the hidden market, which is what you're going to find out through networking. And then if what you're thinking about in terms of next is your own business or your own practice or a side gig, think about the practical steps to that launch and looking for that support out there, support and advice, and similarly to what we talked about, looking for other people who've done it, can mentor and help you on that. Okay. All right, so we're going to do another quick breakout group, all right? Hopefully you'll be in the same groups you were in before, but there might be some variations, so don't worry about that. If you end up with a new person, just do a quick introduction. The speaking out loud here is something that's been shown through the research to be helpful, which is to actually say out loud to a group of people, even if they're strangers to you, what 2 things you're going to do coming out of this workshop towards your transition. So, you know, and these can be little tiny things, they could be bigger things, but two action steps, and then take the rest of the time to talk a little bit more about, you know, maybe some of the exercises we did, some of the things we talked about. So think about that for a second, your 2 action steps, and Lacey will get you back into groups again. And there's the dog. And I think people are coming back. I have to say, it's so strange to not be able to walk around the room and spy on what people are saying and get a sense of what I hope were some good conversations. But this is our virtual reality. There we go. Okay, now we're back. I'm going to wrap things up and hopefully leave some time for questions. Whoops, sorry. Get the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. So again, saying those action steps out loud, you know, can be very helpful. Writing them down, having some sort of an accountability partner, you know, can be helpful as well. Just in terms of, you know, and some of you might have identified action steps to make an appointment with us or sign up for some of our summer offerings, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. So I guess my sort of final, you know, sort of coda to this part of the presentation is that every career transition, whether it's voluntary or not, is an opportunity to just take a moment or an hour or a day or a week or a month to assess and explore what you really want to be doing next. Again, no guarantees, especially in an environment like this, but I'd reiterate a point I made early on that your clarity, your assessment of the skills you have, the experiences you have, the skills you'd like to have, the moves you'd want to make, it's going to help you more successfully search for, you know, network and search for what's next. So a couple things about summer 2020, which of course we're in the middle of already, but we're getting geared up. Watch your email from both Beyond Barnard and Alumni Relations. On the Get Support side of things, we are launching, starting next week, we should be putting out information about our Barnard Summer Colloquium. It's going to go for the next couple of months, and it's going to not only involve some faculty talks, but a lot of career programming from us at Beyond Barnard, and graduate school workshops and panels on various topics. Sorry, I'm pausing to let the dog out. And then specifically within that, I am, myself and my team are running an alumni webinar series. It's going to be 8 Wednesdays. 1 to 2 p.m. live Eastern time, but it will also be recorded. And it's basically a soup to nuts job search, you know, so you can take the whole series, you can drop in and out on the topics that are interesting you. It starts with resumes and cover letters, it ends with salary negotiation and ongoing professional development, and in between hits on networking and interviewing and various other topics. So take one, take more than one. It's all free, and you'll be getting information about that in the next week to 10 days. So keep an eye out for that. And then if you are interested in making an advising appointment with myself or one of my team members, you go to barnard.joinhandshake.com, and you can create, you may already have an account there, especially if you're a recent grad or if you've had an appointment with career development, I'd say anytime in the last 4 to 6 years. You should be in there. But if you run into any snags, it sometimes can be a little bit tricky to get in as an alum, email beyondbarnard.edu for assistance and we'll help you get in. The main thing is that when you get to the sign-in screen, it makes it sound like you have to have a uni or use a student email, and that is not correct for alumni. You need to look down below that for register with email or register with personal email and use that. So that's just one little tip, but if you run into any trouble, just email Beyond Barnard. Our team is really responsive and they'll get back to you. Okay. And on the other side, oops. On the give back side, we would love all of you to join Barnard Connect, which is a platform we launched a year ago. It's a mentoring program, a mentoring platform that alumni can opt into, and you fill out a quick survey talking about, you know, where you work or what your field is and what types of advice you're comfortable giving to students, and then students can reach out to you through the platform. And then we are also going to be using Barnard Connect to launch a really cool thing this summer called Beyond Mentoring, where you as alumni if you have the option, if you have something available, can create a summer project for students. A lot of our students had internships canceled or difficulty finding internships. There's a lot of, freezing in that part of the market as well. So this gives alumni an opportunity to provide some hands-on experience, short-term hands-on experience to students and do a little bit more direct hands-on mentoring. So again, we're launching that in, I'd say, 10 to 14 days. So keep your eyes open for that. And then every year at the end of July, we send a call for volunteers email through Alumni Relations. And basically it's your opportunity to participate in a number of our programs for students during the coming year. A lot of that will probably be virtual. Hopefully some of it, at least some of it, will be on campus. We've got career panels and mentor in residence and various other programs that we'd love to have alumni participate in. So you can, you'll be hearing more about that via email. And then finally, you can post internships and jobs if you have any available. Also through Handshake, you can create an employer account and get that information. Always, if you run into any trouble with any of these platforms, reach us at Beyond Barnard at barnard.edu and we'll get back to you. So I think I'm only 5 minutes behind. I'm really pleased with that. I know I kind of rushed. So I want to open it up to questions now. And we've got a few minutes to answer some of those.
Christine, it's Mandy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. Regarding network or sort of networking, if I already know some of the people I want to reach out to that I've worked with, obviously I'm looking for a job, but I can't ask for that. So what questions do I ask them to guide them to hopefully that they may know of some job openings without asking directly?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because, at any given moment, and especially at this moment, very few people have a job lead, to share with you. And so what you're trying to do when you make that contact is sort of lay the groundwork for, should a job opportunity come up, or should you find a job opportunity at their company that you choose to apply to, that you've sort of laid the groundwork and can sort of circle back to them at that point. In the initial conversation, I would say, in the initial reach out, I would just be upfront about the fact that, everybody, most people know that you're reaching out to make a connection to, look for things. But I think you want to genuinely ask for advice, ask for information. You can talk a little bit about why you're thinking, about their industry. And just, whenever you reach out to people, you want to make it easy to say yes. So I often talk on LinkedIn, you want to make it a two-step process. First, just ask to connect, and then ask for a conversation. And in that conversation, you're just going to want their advice. We had a LinkedIn workshop with a couple of alumni who work at LinkedIn, and the truism they used was, if you ask for advice, you'll get a job. If you ask for a job, you'll get advice. So by asking for advice, by asking really for an open conversation about what they do, what they're experiencing, what their industry is experiencing, you're making that sort of organic connection, having an intelligent conversation that then lays the foundation for being able to make a more specific ask down the road. And certainly, at the end of any session, asking, are there other organizations you should be looking at? Are there people in their circle it might be helpful to speak to? You certainly can ask that question and see if they're willing to either make that connection, or is it okay to use your name when you find that new person on LinkedIn. That can be sort of a good concrete thing to try and leave a networking conversation with.
Oh, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Christine, I'll be greedy and I ask you another question. I think another thing I was looking into was business analysis. What are legitimate organizations that do training on that?
That one, I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. I would say, the way you generally want to assess, you sort of want to do good consumer research, you know, so when you find out the name of an organization, you want to, you know, make your own assessment in terms of, you know, how up to date and comprehensive their website is, how much do they offer in terms of outcomes, do they have open houses, do they offer to put you in touch with their graduates, things like that. But I think another thing you can do is use LinkedIn and use that certificate or that program as a search term and reach out to people who you know, have that background, you know, maybe have taken a course there or have some sort of certification and touch, you know, see if they'll connect with you and tell you a little bit about their experience and what they liked about it. You know, I don't know if they do that specifically, but, you know, General Assembly is an organization that's been around for 9 or 10 years now that's, you know, kind of adapted and expanded its offerings, mostly around tech, but I know they've been expanding their offerings, so that could be worth taking a look at. And I think most universities have schools of professional studies, you know, that have more flexible certificate courses or even certificate programs where you can sometimes take a single course just to sort of test things out. So you just want to sort of do good consumer research and then try and talk to people who are familiar with the, you know, who took the program and can give you some insight.
If they have, like, I think it's called CPU or something, educational points or something.
Right.
Usually a legitimate site too when they
generally, because I think they have to be sort of usually, I'm not an expert on this, but I feel like some professional organization usually has to sort of certify that or sort of say, yes, this counts. So yeah. Let's see, I'm looking at a couple in the chat room. Based on my experience from 2008 to now, what do you think is the most valuable skill to have or develop, especially in a recession environment? I mean, I'm not supposed to say one thing, but I feel like in recent years, like being data literate, even if you don't want to go out and be a data analyst, which, you know, some of you may be interested in doing, and God bless you, you'll probably find a job eventually. But just being data literate, being more familiar with data analysis and how data works and how people make decisions is just kind of, you know, prior to COVID, sort of across the board, you know, private sector, nonprofit sector, little businesses, big businesses, media, everybody is, you know, interested in the data they have and what it means and how can that be interpreted and applied to future plans. So again, even if you're not specifically going to retrain for a role doing data analysis, getting more familiar, being comfortable with it. And there's a lot of ways of doing that. There's some, even at Barnard, we have a center called the Empirical Reasoning Center, ERC. If you just Google, the easiest thing with the new website is to Google it. So if you Google Barnard ERC, they've got free online tutorials that introduce you to data analysis using Excel and some of the other programs. It's a free, relatively easy way to kind of dip your toe in and say, no way, this is not for me, or, oh, this is kind of intriguing, which could then lead you to looking at it a little bit more in a little bit more detail. But what are sometimes called the softer skills are also huge. So, you know, and are right in Barnard's wheelhouse. So being an effective writer, an effective speaker and communicator, project management, product management, you know, being organized, being able to keep people on task. You know, the coding is where a lot of this started out, but, you know, it's hard to become a software engineer without, you know, more extensive training. That's a little bit harder to dip your toe in, I think. So, okay.
Christine, in your experience, how often are people actually finding jobs from job sites?
That's an interesting question. I don't know the stats on that, but I think, so one thing that started being said in 2008, 2009, and then it's making a super big revival, which is don't bother applying online. It's a black hole. They'll never see it. The artificial intelligence will screen you out, right? You have to take, there's an element of truth to that in that, you know, it was actually sort of the perfect storm of the recession last time and the digitalization of the job search process did make the open market a lot harder to navigate than it used to be. But there are definitely best practices that we can help you with, especially in resumes, on how to tailor your resume, how to target your resume so that whether it's a human eye looking at it, skimming it quickly, or an artificial intelligence, an electronic eye skimming it, it increases your chances of getting through that. But also, you know, the open market is not always, you know, electronicized. Sometimes it's good old fashioned, you know, attach your email, attach your resume and cover letter to an email. And again, you know, most people don't do their resumes well. And I'd say even more people don't do their cover letters well. And so probably our number one mission is to help you all do better resumes, and especially help you all do use that space of the cover letter to just show who you are. And that kind of thing really helps you stand out. But yeah, I think in general, if the networking piece of it is very important, you know, looking for jobs and sort of networking your way to opportunities and to people recommending you for opportunities is going to be very important in a recession. If you're making a shift, if you're coming back from a gap, career gap of any kind, or if you have other red flags or perceived red flags on your resume. So if you've switched jobs a lot, if you have, you know, major gaps on your resume, that kind of stuff is going to make it harder for you to get through that sort of black and white screening that HR and or machines will do on that open market end. And it's going to make that networking even more important in getting those people to, you know, sort of get your resume in the right place. So I don't have stats to back me up, but that's my general advice.
Going back to the very first question that Mandy asked, I'm part of several, by the way, this is Deanna, sorry, and thank you so much for doing this.
You.
If, you know, I am very newly laid off because of COVID, in addition to the fact that I already wanted to do a search, and I'm already part of several organizations. I'm on Barnard Women Entertainment Board, I'm on the LA board, I'm part of Right Girl in LA, which is all writers. And one of the things I keep wondering is, in addition to these individual reach outs, is there any value to just shooting a note out to these people who know me and saying, just so you know, I've been laid off and I'm doing the hunt, but if you have something that makes me think, like, is anybody going to really respond to something like that?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that. My impulse is to say no, those tend to not go over well, but I think if you do it to a smallish group, and also I think this is where flexibility comes in, if you give people a couple of options to say, you know, interested in this, but would also be interested in short-term projects, and then finally just sitting down over coffee and Zoom, or, you know, eventually maybe someday in person, and just talking, you know, just talking through, brainstorming some ideas, getting some advice from you, hearing from you what's going on, you know. So I think if you give, the key thing is if you put out something sort of blanket and ask people, let me know if you hear of something, that's just, most people don't know of anything in general, and especially in this moment. And so it's too easy for them to just kind of either say no or ignore it. Your goal in reaching out to people is to make it easy to say yes, you know. So simplest request ever, let's connect on LinkedIn, you know, or let's have a 10-minute chat over Zoom, you know, make it easy for them to say yes, ask them for something they can give you, which is advice, or I'd love to brainstorm with you, or I'd love to just ask you about X, you know. So just, I think putting out something a little more broadly, not hugely, I wouldn't email, you know, your whole email address book. But yeah, if you wanted to target some groups just to say, you know, I've definitely heard stories of people, you know, of getting things back, but make it easy for each of those 10 or 20 people to send you something back, give them something concrete to, you know, to send you back.
Cool, thank you. I had a feeling, but I just keep thinking, like, there are all these women I know who are like,
I know. And it's not, yeah, I mean, it is more efficient. It's always one of those things, like, you're going to get it out there more broadly, but you don't want to do it so broadly and generically that it, you know, brings back nothing. So.
And I wanted to ask what date the Wednesday classes were gonna, the Wednesday.
So the first Wednesday, so it's the week of the 15th. So I think it's June 17th will be the session on resumes. And it'll be every Wednesday after that through the beginning of August. And they'll all be recorded, and you'll be able to access the PowerPoints and all of that good stuff. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? We're starting to get, I think we need to stop soon. definitely feel free. I think I flashed it quickly. My individual address is cshin@barnard.edu. So CSHIN as in Nancy at barnard.edu. And then you can always email Beyond Barnard at barnard.edu, and they'll forward it to me or to the person who can schedule you. So I guess let me just see if there's any other, yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat function. So thank you all for your time and for participating, and would love to hear back from you. And good luck. It's a tough moment, but good luck. You'll land on your feet. We all will, one way or the other.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.